right, good morning. We're going to convene the county board for October 19th. If you'd arise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You guys have sound. I didn't actually hear anybody there. Do you have sound in the room?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right. So we're on to item 2, which is amendments to the agenda. We actually are going to move the consent agenda up to right after recognition of interested citizens, because we have members from the public that want to be here for the consent agenda, and we didn't want to keep them waiting, so we're going to move that up. I'm not aware of any other amendments to the agenda. I think there was a sort of a small inconsequential change to 7.4. But other than that, are there any other amendments to the agenda?
I'll move the as amended.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended. We have a second. Tracy, would you take the roll?
Commissioner Wickman-Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye. Motion carries. The agenda is amended. Item 3 is to approve the minutes of our October 5th board meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of October 5th?
Mr. Chair, so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Tracy, would you take the roll?
Commissioner Wickman-Brecky.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye. Motion carries. Item 4 is recognition of interested citizens, and this is limited to items that are not on the agenda, and it's 5 minutes per person per subject, and speakers are asked to approach the microphone for the benefit of viewers and interested citizens. Does anybody wish to speak?
Is there a microphone on the?
Yeah, just sit in the chair, you'll be fine.
You'll be just fine.
Do you mind if I stand?
Oh, no,
Just more
not at all.
accustomed to. Do you mind if I take my mask off? Is that all
Just
right?
gonna get a video of you.
Yep.
Okay, great. Good morning, County Commissioners. My name is Brian Huntington. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Larkin Hoffman. You should have received a letter from me dated October 12th, 2021. Just want to reiterate that I'm here in a representative capacity of your constituents, 3 individuals, principally Tom Grant, Steve Casal, Eric Olson. They live in close proximity to Fieldstone Industrial Park. And of course, as you're aware, there are a variety of conditional use permit applications that are before you today. And I'm not addressing those. Those have had a public hearing, but there is another conditional use permit application which is not before you today. And it's regarding that application that I have asked to speak about and been granted permission to speak about. So thank you for your time. I will just say generally, my clients are very concerned about the rezoning, the recent rezoning to RBR. This Fieldstone Industrial Park is over 8 acres in size. It's presently undeveloped raw agricultural land, and it was rezoned recently to RBR, permitting a variety of, I would say, more industrial type uses. The specific use that we're talking about with the GS Truck and Trailer Repair and GS Transport Express application, there are 2 businesses owned by the same person that are proposing to use this site, which fronts on County Road 62. And the vast majority of the site, about over 3.5 acres, have been proposed and would be available to use, as noted by the city staff, or county staff, excuse me, for storage of semi-trailers. And there would be about a 9,000 square foot building that would be there. The vast majority of the site would be used for outdoor storage of semis. It's not clear to me in reading through the rather short written statement from the applicant, Godana Bossat, whether those would all be owned or leased by the owner. It appears that they would not, because she says, I will be using the space to have drivers park while they're off duty while I work on the customer's trucks. I presume that means that the intention was she would be servicing semis from other parties. The main basis of our objection with respect to the CUP application is that it is contrary to table 20.20-4, which of course is the legislative ordinance that you have adopted with respect to permitted uses in the county. And specifically, there's an express and specific provision for outdoor parking of semi-tractor trailers. And in the RBR district, that is not allowed. The county staff took the position in their original report that, well, this is an accessory use, this being outdoor storage of semis. Respectfully, I disagree. Number one, I disagree when you have a specific prohibition on parking semi-tractor trailers that you can then do that as an accessory use, because as a matter of legal interpretation, the specific prevails over the general. And here you have a very direct specific prohibition. And second, I would not agree that parking of the semis would be an accessory use, given what the applicant itself is saying they propose to do with the property, which is use about 174,000 square feet for outdoor storage of semis and about 9,000 square feet for servicing vehicles in the building. And so we respectfully requested, and I understand that it's not coming before you today, and I understand it's under further analysis by your staff, but we would respectfully request that it would be denied, given the fact that it appears the principal use proposed by the applicant is specifically prohibited. And we did also make a request under the Data Practices Act with respect to documents, with respect to the recent rezoning.
Go ahead.
My clients do have concerns about whether procedural prerequisites were satisfied. I understand that, such as, for example, with the subject application, the 60-day deadline was or is October 25th. So you have a lot of time. You could extend the CUP application another 60 days while we are reviewing the materials that will be provided. And I'm grateful that I understand staff is presently working on responding to those requests. So nothing further. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to the consent. Well, unless there's anyone else, I should check first. Is there anyone else that would like to speak during this time?
Leslie is checking.
She's getting there for here for consent.
Got it. It appears it's just for consent.
Okay.
There you go.
We'll wait a moment here.
We're good, Commissioner.
Okay, we're on to the consent agenda, which we've moved up. I'll read the consent agenda. These generally pass as one motion. 7.1 to adopt resolution 2021-199, authorizing a budget amendment and the purchase of a property along Trunk Highway 169 and County Road Highway 59 in St. Lawrence Township. 7.2 is to adopt resolution 2021-202, approving entering in a contract with Cone Inc. for a 2021 elevator modernization project and amending the budget to utilize capital funds. 7.3 is to approve the request for conditional use permit for a contractor yard with associated outdoor storage J&S Land LLC, applicant and property owner on Lot 2, Block 2, Fieldstone Industrial Park. 7.4 is to approve the request for a conditional use permit to construct and operate an automotive repair facility and lease space. Sasha Boyko, applicant and JS Land LLC, property owner on Lot 1, Block 2, Fieldstone Industrial Park. 7.5 is to approve the request for a conditional use permit to operate a truck repair and service business and lease space. MA Industries LLC, Mark and Anita Sprung, applicants and J&S Land LLC property owners on Lot 3, Block 2, Fieldstone Industrial Park. 7.6 is to approve the request, excuse me, for a conditional use permit for a landscape contractor yard. Messenbrink Construction, applicant and JS Land LLC property owner on Lot 2, Block 1, Fieldstone Industrial Park. 7.7 is to approve payroll processing of personnel actions. That is our consent agenda. Does anyone wish to pull an item for separate discussion? If not, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Okay, we
Second.
have a motion and a second. Discussion? Okay, Tracy, if you take the roll.
Commissioner Wickman Brecky,
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf,
Aye.
Commissioner Beard,
Aye.
Commissioner Beer,
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye. Motion carries. We're on to item 5, which is communication. We will always be clear about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And under that category, 5.1 is to receive a COVID-19 update.
Good morning, Commissioner Ulrich and commissioners. I am going to share my screen here in just a moment and do an update. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you for inviting me again. I'm Lisa Brodsky, the Public Health Director. I'm going to do a quick update here on COVID, and as always, I'm available for questions after. As of yesterday, the county was at 21,503 confirmed COVID cases. And we've had 159 deaths. This is a little bit updated from the information I shared in the presentation that's attached, but we have had 6 deaths this past week from COVID. It's interesting to note that we've also, it's fairly in line with the number of people that have made it into the ICU with COVID, which is at 170. So really it's, for those that actually get to the ICU, these are really very sick people. It looks like about 11 people have once they've made it to the ICU, have survived. I'm going to do an update on vaccinations. We're still at about 43,000. We still do our weekly Wednesday clinic. Shots have been trickling in. Shots are still widely available for first and second dose at pharmacies, clinics, etc. We are still vaccinating those that may have barriers elsewhere or barriers to accessing the traditional mechanisms of vaccinations at this time. We have started doing 3rd doses for those that are recommended. These include those that have fairly significant health issues. Overall, Minnesota is pretty close to 74% for residents over 16 plus. Scott County is at almost 78% of those that are 16 plus. This is based on the new census population numbers. As far as those that have completed the series, we are just under about 75%, and this was as of 10/15. So we, again, can continue to trickle up a little bit at a time at this point. Whoops, sorry. And when we look at vaccinations by age, these are based on the American Community Survey population estimates, so numbers are probably just a little bit off. But as you can see, looking at the age range, we have really good coverage with the 65 plus and the 90%, even the 50 to 64 plus, about 83, a little bit over 83% have completed their shots. Our numbers are significantly lower in the younger populations, particularly the 12 to 15-year-olds. We're just over 60% for those that have had one dose, and only at about 57% for those that have completed the series. Most of our cases that we've had, about 32% of our cases in the past couple of weeks, between 30 and 35% have been in that younger population, and particularly in that teen range. 50% have been high school ages of those that are in the younger kids. So we did offer some additional vaccination shots at the middle school for that group. We didn't have a huge number of kids come, but we again continue to do them a few at a time. I'm going to talk a little bit about some significant impact to children that we're seeing. Hospitalizations are increasing for all pediatric age groups. If we look at hospitalizations per 10,000 by month, this is state data from the Department of Health. We can see if we're comparing last year at this time, August 2020 to August 2021, we're actually at an increase as far as those children that are getting sick with COVID and getting hospitalized. Particularly, there's been a pretty big increase in that 0 to 4 age range. And we're tracking this fairly carefully. They believe that this is because of the Delta variant, because it does have such a higher significant viral load. So we're, for all age groups, we are higher than we were last year at this time prior to school starting. New cases in children less than 12, we're seeing, again, this is from July, comparing July 2020 to where we are today. New cases in children under 12 have surpassed all previous peaks that we've seen since the beginning of COVID. We are seeing a lot of cases associated with schools. The blue bar represents students and the green bar represents staff. As you can see from this, we have seen a decrease in staff since earlier time of last year. This probably is likely due to staff being vaccinated, but we are seeing a very high and dramatic increase in pre-K to K as far as number of children that are exposed and sick with COVID.
So,
Again, statewide data.
Lisa?
Yes, sir.
So going back to this page, the hospitalizations of, so per 10,000 of whatever it's 0 to 4, is there 3 that, how many have been hospitalized total?
In the state?
In the county? We don't know that. In the state?
In the state, I can get that for you. In the county, we report that weekly. So I believe I'd have to double check that number. I would have to look at the current report.
And
I'd have to flip to that.
And most of them they're in the hospital for a couple days, a week?
It varies. We do have some that are just in for a few days, but we also have some significant long haulers that have been in for not only a long period of time, but get released and get readmitted and readmitted. We've had some folks in Scott County that have been hospitalized 3 or 4 times.
Hey, Lisa, this is Commissioner Beard. When you talk about long haul, what are you talking about for length? Because mine's been 4 weeks now, and it's starting to lengthen. But what are you talking about when you're talking long haul?
I know I'm not. I would have to check the definition of that for you, Commissioner Beard. We're looking at some individuals that have been sick for 2 or 3 months without. The weakness that you're probably feeling at this point after 4 weeks is probably, I would say that's a lot of what we're hearing, that people have had, they may be over the cough, but they're still a couple of weeks later that they are still experiencing some symptoms. But the average is about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
But again, we see, even with kids, we're seeing some significant weakness. You talked about delirium earlier. We're seeing some significant impact and continual symptoms that could go 2 to 3 months even.
Wowzers.
And those are really considered those long haulers.
Okay. Well, in my case, the cough continues and the weakness. Do something for 2 hours and I'm completely wiped out the rest of the day. That's way better than it was that first and second week when the fever and the delirium were. That was scary. Hey, follow-on question. You talked about
Yes, sir.
6 county last week. Do you know the age range of those that passed?
I could get that data for you, sir.
That would be helpful because I'm looking
It's,
at our rates and over 65 is like what 84% vaccinated or something. And I know that across the state, it's the vaccination rate for especially for the older population is pretty high, but that seems to be where most of the deaths are. And that concerns me a bit. Should concern all of us actually, but I'm just curious just if you know what that number is.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Beard, for the question. I believe the last time I looked, the average age of those that have passed was in the 60s, but it's we are seeing younger. That it is skewing towards the younger ages now, but I could certainly get that data for you.
Lisa, since we paused here and asked a lot of questions, I had a couple of questions from earlier slides. You don't have to go back to them, but just the question of booster shots. You indicated you're doing some booster shots. Are those, first of all, those Moderna booster shots? And secondly, you mentioned they have to have underlying conditions or severe underlying conditions. Is there an age group that's eligible just based on age, or is it age and existing conditions?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Ulrich. I do have a couple slides coming up that highlight that information. And
Okay.
if that's okay with you, I can hold off to that. It might just be the
Well,
next.
I'll throw in one more that you can answer along the way. I'm just wondering, kind of hoping that when you do these clinics or stuff, if it can be a dual purpose, I'm wondering if people can get the flu shot at the same time from you guys. But anyway, let me know on the upcoming slide.
To answer that question, Commissioner Ulrich, we are not currently offering flu shots for the public at this time.
Okay, all right.
But you are certainly able to get a shot. If you go elsewhere, you are certainly able to get a flu shot at the same time as a COVID shot.
Okay. Thank you.
This, again, this is looking at the blue bar is from 2021 to 2020 to 2020.
Sorry. Lisa, I'm sorry, I accidentally muted you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay, that's okay. I'll just start from the beginning of the slide. The orange bar on this is the current year and the blue bar is previous year. So we track this, and our current cases are in schools statewide are outpacing last year's cases. And this one is the weekly total that we get from the schools, directly from schools, also childcare and youth serving programs of the number of kids that are sick, increasing over time. So here's the booster update, Commissioner Ulrich, that you were asking about. Some of this information that I put in the slide last week is already, I have updates for them. But currently the recommendation as of today, the following groups should get the booster, and it is the Pfizer booster at this time. The recommendation is 6 months after the second dose. And who we're looking at are those that are 65 plus, the residents in long-term care settings, and 50 to 64-year-olds with underlying medical conditions should get the boosters. Also, the following groups may get boosters at this time, again, for Pfizer. So those that had the first and second dose of Pfizer, with the second dose being at least 6 months prior, those 18 to 49 that are high risk for severe COVID due to some underlying medical condition, or those that are 18 to 64 that have a increased or higher risk for COVID due to occupational exposures. And some of those would include those that are in healthcare, those that are in closed settings like jail, or a closed population setting.
Just a question then on this. It's my understanding, maybe I'm wrong, that the county gave almost exclusively Moderna shots. Am I wrong in that? Because then that would mean at this point, you're probably not doing many boosters.
Correct. The bulk of the vaccines that we did were Moderna due to the Pfizer requirements for storage. And I do have a Moderna update shortly. But the bulk of the ones that we're doing right now are Pfizer with those that have underlying health conditions. We get a lot of questions. We still have our hotline up and running, and we're getting a lot of questions, a lot of calls about that particular thing, Commissioner Ulrich, that they had the Moderna shot and can they get a Pfizer shot now? And the answer to that is there really is no guidance. So the answer really is no. If you've gotten Pfizer, you should stick with Pfizer. And the booster dose is not required to be considered fully vaccinated. It really is just kind of exactly what it says. It's a booster of your immunity. We are waiting for ACIP to make some decisions. Here is what the tentative schedule was as of last week. I do have an update on that. We are anticipating approval by the ACIP either to October 20th or the 21st. That's going to approve Moderna for boosters. We tentatively will begin offering Moderna boosters to our staff and law enforcement. Those are the ones that we did early on, the first ones that we did, because that was about 8 months out, and our tentative schedules will start offering those October 25th. We are also now on this slide, it does say October 26th for Pfizer, but we are now anticipating approval on the Pfizer dose for the 5 to 11-year-olds on November 2nd or 3rd. And our tentative plan is to start vaccinating in the schools around November 8th. Again, all of this depends on the approval of the ACIP, but that is what we are currently anticipating. As far as J&J, we will not be doing J&J boosters at this time, and I'm not quite sure when that will be approved. And that was the end of my presentation.
Lisa, this is Beard.
Go ahead.
There's a more traditional vaccine that's been running around the world actually for a couple of years now called Novavax. Any idea when FDA is going to actually release that for consumption in the United States? It keeps popping up every couple of weeks in the news, but I haven't heard anything more about that.
Commissioner Beard, I haven't heard yet on that either. I certainly can look into that for you.
Yeah, if you would hear something about that, let us know. Thanks.
So Lisa, I have a kind of a crazy question. Commissioner Beard would agree wholeheartedly when I preface my question like that. But anyhow, let's say somebody got a Johnson & Johnson vaccination and they're thinking to themselves, boy, I wish I would have gotten a Pfizer or a Moderna. They seem to be more effective, and I'm not sure there's going to be a booster for Johnson & Johnson. Can I start over? Could I get a Moderna and start over?
Commissioner Ulrich, not only is that not a crazy question, but that's probably one of the most common questions that we are receiving on our hotline. And the guidance is that you would need to start over your series. So you would, if you chose to do Moderna or Pfizer, you would need to do the first and second, and then 6 months later, the third dose. And you're certainly able to do that. There's plenty of those vaccines out there right now, Moderna and Pfizer.
Mr. Chair, Lisa, but didn't I see that Johnson & Johnson, this was in the ballpark? If you got their booster, which was approved Friday, then you're at 100% protection. Did I see that somewhere?
I could double check that for you, Commissioner Wolf.
Oh.
I have not been keeping up to date on the J&J.
And do we get the $100 for each of those shots if we do switch to it? Okay.
It's a very good question, Commissioner Wolf. We are not handing out any incentives at this time from the county.
It's funny because if they're trying to get these last people on, then they got rid of the incentive, then there's even less incentive. I don't know if you're going to push them over the edge or not. I don't know. You don't need to answer that. Thank you.
I think, for Scott County Public Health, Commissioner Wolf, our goal is really to push, to get the kids vaccinated. I think that will really be a game changer for both parents and the spread of COVID. We do know that there'll be, if a kid is exposed in the school and they're unvaccinated, they have to stay out of school for 7 days. So it's a huge issue for parents because there's constant exposures in the classroom. So this will help alleviate parents' concerns and will help keep parents in the workforce instead of having to stay at home with their children when they are not able to go to school. So.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may, a couple questions. I have not heard anything about Moderna reaching out to the FDA for full approval. Do you have any news on that?
I do not have an update on that, Commissioner Beer, but I could double check for that.
Well, I'm just
Right
curious,
now, we are still under the EUA for the booster, is my understanding.
and it's just more of a curiosity question with Pfizer getting that, like what's the holdup with Moderna? So yeah, that'd be anything that, I mean, I could go to my internet memes, but I thought I would go to you for that trusted information. Also,
Thank you for that.
for sure. I was going to try to get just ahead of time, but I did not, so I apologize. Is there, and I always try to you hear all this stuff. I mean, golly, we understand that information changes, knowledge changes on this thing. And I think that's part of the frustration is we're trying to get a hold of it, but we just can't. But so I asked some of these questions to try to quiet rumors and whatever else. Can I, Joe Blow, go someplace to find every single ingredient that is in all of these vaccines and therapies, like 100% of them?
Mm-hmm. Commissioner Beer, I believe that information is included on the vaccine information sheets of all of the ingredients in the vaccinations.
Can I ask you to verify that, please? I trust information I'm getting from you.
Yeah. I can certainly pull that for you and send that to you.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
And then do we think that herd immunity or community immunity, is there a trademark on that yet? Community immunity? Are we at the point where that's probably just a pipe dream and isn't going to happen with some of these areas that have such a high vax rate? And I'm going to throw another term, and I hope this isn't politically charged, but is there such a thing as natural immunity? If I've had it, which I had, do I have antibodies that give me some level of protection? So with those two groups, whatever the right term is, it doesn't get people flying off the handle, but those that are vaxxed and those that have had it and recovered with antibodies, that's got to be a huge number, way higher than 70%. But I have not heard much chit chat about herd immunity or community immunity, whatever you want to call. And I asked a question last month, do these vax therapies sort of work in the way that doesn't bring about herd immunity because it really only attacks a single protein, thereby allowing more variants to happen? What's your take? What's your professional opinion on that? We've got a huge rate that have antibodies by going, a huge percentage that have had a vax or therapy. Where's herd immunity?
Commissioner Berry, those were a lot of questions in your question. And I wish Dr. Wilcox was on the phone, and I don't believe he is on the phone. A couple of simple answers is it depends for almost all of your questions. It depends on, as far as if you're sick, it depends on how sick you are and how your body reacts to the illness. What we don't know also is a way to measure how long your antibodies. You are definitely going to build up antibodies. It's just like the flu, but we know we need the flu shot every year because those antibodies only protect you for a certain length of time. Just as we will likely need for a significant time, we will need a shot annually for COVID. Just like the booster shot that we're doing now, we figured about 6 months is how long your immunity is lasting for that. As far as community immunity, again, it depends. It depends on if we get a variant and if our vaccines are a good match for that variant. On a call a couple weeks ago, Dr. Mike Osterholm said we will likely be dealing with variants for the next 5 years. And with international travel and from places where they don't have as high of an immunization rate, we're seeing a lot more variants that are being discovered. I think the last time I looked, we were on variant Mu. So we've already had Lambda, Kappa that petered out, that we didn't see any, that either the vaccine was a good match or it just didn't, it just didn't survive. So right now we're at Mu. I think they've discovered that in Colombia. It depends on, the thought right now is our vaccine is a good match. So that community immunity in that case is working. I would like to see us at least at about 85% from my personal opinion of where we're going to hopefully have enough community immunity to for it to not mutate anymore. And then within those 15%, you're probably having some, you have some individuals that have been sick and have enough immunity to protect them. You asked a question about the monoclonal antibodies or treatment. That answer I don't know. I can look that one up for you about whether we're, focusing on that one protein. That's probably a good question for Dr. Wilcox or a medical question, and I can check with Dr. Wilcox on that one.
Well, and that was more specific to the actual vaccines or therapies, or so because truly I'm tired of the garbage on both sides. I'm just asking these questions. I'm not trying to get to anything. I don't have an agenda.
Yes.
I'm just tired of hearing it on both sides. Golly, this is not political. So I'm just saying the Pfizer and Moderna, they're really not vaccines, they're more therapies, right? I mean, I know that the definition has changed for vaccine, which is fine. I'm not talking about the monoclonal antibodies. I'm just trying to figure out, the folks that have been vaxxed, are they, this is something I haven't been able to find the answer. Do they still carry, and I use the word shed, I don't know if that's the right word, but they still carry the virus. Is that correct? It's not like they're not living in a bubble. I mean, they're vaccinated, but still potentially carry that virus and can pass it to other folks, right?
Commissioner Bear, my understanding is when you get vaccinated, it triggers a reaction in your body where you develop your own antibodies. So you really aren't carrying the virus where you would pass it on to anybody. So the vaccine really triggers an immune reaction or for your own body to develop those antibodies enough to protect you. We do know that the vaccines are working from the data that we are receiving. About 1% of cases have been breakthrough cases. Most of the people that are ending up in the hospitals are unvaccinated. 99% of those that end up in the ICU are unvaccinated. And most of the individuals that are dying are unvaccinated. So, the vaccine really is for your body to create antibodies.
And on those antibodies, I think you and I were emailing maybe, you can measure the strength of antibodies with those that have been vaccinated versus you cannot measure those that have gone through it and recovered. Is that a fair statement?
That is a good question, Commissioner Beer, and I don't know the answer to that one, but I will confer with Dr. Wilcox.
Okay. And my last question, I believe, is natural immunity. Is that the right term for people that have gotten sick and have recovered, or is that some charged term?
I am not familiar with that term. We don't, this is the first time we've been exposed to this virus, which is why it makes it a new virus. So no one really has that natural immunity. Any time you're exposed to the virus with illness, your body builds up antibodies. So it really isn't a natural immunity. It's your body's response to that exposure.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, because words matter, and Cali, people love to, on both sides, or whatever, however many sides there are, it seems like there's a lot. So I just wanted to try to get some of that, and I appreciate that. Thank you for your response and those that are forthcoming. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Bear.
Lisa, I'm looking at, excuse me, an article from Time Magazine. Excuse me, it indicates that last Thursday, a 19-member panel of experts advising the FDA voted unanimously to approve the booster for Moderna. So they've cleared that hurdle. So according to this article, the full approval of the booster would be
Thank you.
shortly.
Thank you for checking on that, Commissioner Ulrich.
Any more questions or comments on this item?
Thank you, Lisa.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Thanks for all your good work. It's been a lot of work and a long haul on the working end of this. Whew. Probably going to continue
Thank you.
for quite some time. Thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you. I look forward, Commissioner Ulrich, to the day that I can come and back to the board and say COVID is officially over. We're still a ways out, but we almost see the light at the end of that tunnel. So thank you for having me again today.
You live in Scott County, the entertainment mecca. What's the over under on that? What's the over under on that actually happening? That's what I want to know. Somebody has odds on that, my guess.
All right.
All in on red. I'm all in on red.
We're on to item 6, which is to receive information on the Scott County Delivers topic, financial supports for family stability and self-sufficiency.
I'm sorry. Good morning, Chairman, good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. It's nice to be with you this morning.
Welcome.
Thank you for your time this morning. We have a really good group of people together today to talk about financial supports for families in our community. And as we get started, I just want to remind everyone as we go through this discussion that the data points that you're seeing really do represent families in need. These are people who are struggling, who are trying to care for kids and make sure that their needs are met and that they have access to food and housing and daycare and all those essentials. And so I think it just helps to remember that we're talking about people's experiences here when we look at this data. We also want to have some conversation with you this morning just about some of the challenges to the myths that are held about families that are receiving some of these public assistance services. And I think the staff that we're going to talk with this morning have some really good information to share around that. So as we get started, we'll ask folks to do some introductions, and I'm just going to go down the list on my handout. Deb Greening.
Morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I supervise all of the family assistance programs if there's a minor child in the home, excuse me. So that includes the program, Minnesota Family Investment Program, the Diversionary Work Program, which are 2 cash programs, SNAP, which is our food program, and I also supervise the child care assistance program. So any of the programs that currently have minor children involved. Thank you. Thanks, Deb. Brandon.
Good morning. My name is Brandon Cometti. I'm the Employment and Training Supervisor. And in our department, programs I supervise are the Minnesota Family Investment Program, the Diversionary Work Program, SNAP Employment and Training. We also have some other programs not geared specifically towards families, but the WIOA Adult Program, State and Dislocated Worker, Minnesota Youth Program, and our Youth senior program as well.
Thank you. Lisa?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Lisa Burkhartsmeyer, and I supervise the child support team.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Good morning, I'm Jennifer Panning. I'm in a relatively new position at the county, which is eligibility navigator. And I've been a financial worker at the county for nearly 8 years. And this new position is helping clients and the public navigate some of the more complex rules and access to the public assistance programs.
Thanks, Jennifer. We're going to talk a little bit more about your role specifically in a few minutes. Carrie.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I'm Carrie Ouimet, the Economic Assistance Director.
Thanks for being here this morning, Carrie. All right, so Leslie is going to help me facilitate this meeting this morning. So I think what I'd like to do is start with the child support program, and that begins on page 7. Thank you, Mary Keene, for helping with the documents. There we go. Thanks. So Lisa, I understand that you, this is kind of your area. I wonder if you could start by talking just first about how does child support fit into the rest of these financial assistance programs? How is it the same? How is it different?
Well, our clients, our custodial parents who apply for public assistance programs, MFIP, child care, medical assistance, they when the custodial parent applies, we get an automatic referral to the child support program. And the idea behind that is if we can establish paternity, we can establish a court order where a non-custodial parent is ordered to pay child support, the overall goal would be for us to do that, and then these parents could get off public assistance. That's the ultimate goal. We also, that's only a small percentage of our entire caseload, though. Most of our cases are what's called non-public assistance cases, where parents who have gotten divorced and just need someone to collect the child support part of it, to get that financial. A lot of times the financial and the money thing is the stressor. So we can collect the money that's owed and pass it on to the custodial parent. People can apply for those services independently.
Okay, Lisa, then there's two data sets I want to look at. So this one looks at of all of the dollars you collect, what percentage of that is distributed? Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
This is current support. There's current support, and then there's arrears, child support that has not been paid in the past, and we can collect on that also. So this one specifically is current.
Okay, and then the next slide, Mary, if you would go to page 8. So the next slide looks at the actual dollars that are distributed. So can you talk us through that data a little bit? That's kind of impressive to see those amounts.
Yeah, that for our calendar years, we collect well over generally $1 million a month and get it out to families for the support of their children. I don't know what else to say about this. It's current and it's past due support.
Okay.
So yeah, we can do it through income withholding. Non-custodial parents can pay directly. Most of it is through income withholding.
All right, and I'm assuming that the big decrease to the far right of that slide is a COVID impact. Can you just explain that?
Actually, that's not. That's just because it's only the first 6 months of the year.
Oh, for sure. Do we have 2020 in there? We do. Okay. Yep, we do. Thanks.
Do we? Okay.
Okay, thank you. So the narrative says that about 60% of the families that are on assistance, or the 60% of the families that you serve never go on assistance. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Lisa, how many families is this you're serving approximately?
I didn't quite hear that, Leslie.
How many families are you serving here for these dollars that you're connecting roughly?
Right now, our active caseload for September, is 2,648. That's actual. We average about 2,700 in 2020, 2,800 in 2019. That's cases.
And how many workers do we have focused on that?
I have 12 child support officers and 2.5 case aides, or 11 child support officers and 2.5 case aides.
And Lisa, just for people that are unfamiliar with this program, would you just summarize some of the social emotional benefits of this? Child support is about getting money to custodial parents, but there's some social emotional pieces about this for kids as well, right?
Yeah, studies show that when children have the emotional and financial support of both parents, they do better all around. And that's the overall arching theme of the state child support office. Trying to get both parents involved in their children's lives. However, we really do not have anything to say about custody and visitation. And oftentimes that's a real frustration for both a non-custodial parent and a custodial parent. Because if a non-custodial parent were saying you owe blank amount of money and you need to pay your support, and they don't get to see their children, that's real frustrating for them. So then, you know, we get in the middle of that, and there's not a whole lot that we can do other than refer them to other services for support.
Okay. And then can we go to page 9 and either Lisa or Carrie, I'm wondering if you could talk through this slide. This is a DHS Performance Report data set. Could someone just walk through what it means?
Carrie, do you want to do that?
Sure. Yes, I can definitely try. This is one of probably the more complicated measures. So this is a cost effectiveness ratio, and just kind of as it says in the about this measure, it shows the difference between the amount that we collect within Lisa's unit and take that and divide it by our total expenditures for the federal fiscal year. $5 is the target for statewide performance. You can see that kind of looking back to federal fiscal year 2011, there are years that we exceeded that, and there are years that we came a little short. And there's a lot of factors that go into this. It's not as simple as what we're collecting and distributing based on our expenses. There's also certain pieces of that with kind of interstate collections and fees and other factors that are taken into account when they do this calculation. I think also in part, and Lisa, you could maybe speak to this better, but we've seen a slight decrease in the caseload over the last few years, but as we know, our expenses continue to increase, just cost of living, et cetera. And so when we have a little bit lesser of a caseload, we're collecting a little bit less, maybe distributing a little bit less, still meeting those performance measures of the 80% and some of those other things that you've seen, but it's all sort of relative. But another thing that shows on the graph that we're really proud of is that we are well above the statewide average. The county has historically done really well and way outperformed other counties and many of the other counties in the state.
So at this point, Carrie, are we losing financial incentive money based on this performance?
We are not.
Okay. All right. Leslie, did you have any other questions about child support before we move on?
No, thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to ask one more thing about this, and we have talked in a lot of different settings about the backlog in the courts, and I'm just wondering if there are strategies in place to help with the catch up on the child support caseloads.
That's a really good question. COVID brought on these waivers that we had to, that the state had these waivers that we could not, our automatic enforcement remedies like driver's license suspensions and passport denials, along with contempt actions, we were not able to pursue due to COVID. And those waivers have been lifted, but now there's this large backlog with cases that we would like to pursue contempt of court actions on. And right now there's other backlogs in other areas like criminal. So the district courts, they're busy. And we are right now just kind of marking time. I've met with the county attorneys, and we will, as soon as we are a go, we will be pursuing, we've got a list of cases that we will pursue contempt actions on. So we're in close contact with the attorneys who are in close contact with the district court folks to move forward.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Mary, would you move us to page 11, please? All right, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about employment and training. And I wonder if someone could walk through this slide before, just to kind of explain it before we ask some questions.
I can do that. So this measures our work participation rate within the county. What this measure is showing is clients who are on public assistance in the MFIP program are required to engage in certain activities related to work, job searching, actual work, job readiness activities, volunteering, education, things like that. The ultimate goal, obviously, is for them to get off of assistance. This sort of measures the performance of the clients that we have that are engaging in those activities on a regular basis. You'll see in 2020, there was a significant decrease, and just like Lisa had mentioned, the state had put in several waivers where we're not allowed to sanction participants who were not participating in these activities. Those recently went away, so we are now able to do that again. But that's why you see that significant decrease there in the past year.
Chris, could I just add something? Thank you for that, Brandon. I think one thing that's important to add when we are explaining what the work participation rate is, like Brandon said, that this shows those that are participating in certain countable work activities. I think it's important to note that what this rate does not reflect is all of the other folks that are receiving MFIP assistance, and they are participating, but maybe not to the exact hourly requirement level that they need to be at to fit in this rate. So this rate is kind of an all or nothing type rate. Your hourly requirement is based on the composition of your household, meaning if you have at least one child under the age of 6, you have a certain hourly requirement. If all of your kids are over the age of 6, you have a different hourly requirement. There are also many activities that are allowed within MFIP, but that don't count towards the participation rate, namely our folks that might be kind of struggling with some physical or mental health barriers that are getting treated for those that have a child or adult in their home that they're caring for, as just two of many examples that those folks are all working towards, for the most part, working towards moving off of assistance, getting off the program, becoming stable. But all of that activity, even though they are, maybe turning in logs to showing that they're doing it, they don't even count towards this rate. So this is just kind of a snapshot of a certain group of folks. Just wanted to kind of clarify that.
So Carrie, does this data, or is there other data in the packet, does this data tell you anything about opportunities for improvement in the work your staff is doing?
Sure. I think it absolutely does. I think that, for a long time, and the state has recognized too, that this is much more of a process measure than it is an outcome measure, because it doesn't tell the whole story, kind of like I just shared. But I think that one thing that I am particularly really proud about that we do here at Scott County is every single month, Brandon's team and Deb's team meet together. So the eligibility specialists and the employment counselors sit together. They review all of their cases that are in common. They take a look at who is in compliance, who might not be in compliance, actions that they're taking, so they can make sure that as the two kind of workers that are associated with a case are working together, they're both on the same page about what's going on with that case. And I think that that is had a direct impact on our success with the work participation rate. We tend to be kind of neck and neck with Dakota as either number one, the highest rate in the county, or number 2, or in the 7-county metro area, excuse me. And I think that that plays a really big role in it. So they certainly keep a close eye on this, and when they see maybe it's dropping, use those meetings as one tool to try to increase the rate. That being said, there's a lot of counties I know that certainly still take a look at this, but don't put a lot of weight in it, given the fact that it's not tied to any current funding structure. It's one, again, that DHS has recognized It only tells a little bit of the story. This is a process measure. It's a federal requirement that we still measure it and we still give information to counties, but they don't put a ton of weight in it.
All right. In your narrative, you talk about being how highly regulated these programs are, and that you are not able to provide employment and training services to people that don't specifically qualify for this program. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think, and Brandon, feel free to jump in. So that is true. So this, in order to participate in the MFIP program, for example, somebody would have to be a recipient of MFIP assistance. So that eligibility is determined by Deb's family's team. And then once they are determined eligible for MFIP, a referral is made to employment services. And as the case is for all of our employment and training programs, each one has very specific requirements for eligibility, and unless somebody meets every single one isn't enrolled, we aren't able to serve kind of anybody outside of those parameters.
Are you seeing people that are falling through the cracks, or what? What's your observation? Oh, go ahead, Leslie.
Chris, can I build on that? One of the things they stated is not working, and I'm trying to understand it, is employment and training programming is limited to serving only those who meet specific eligibility criteria. No ability to serve the universal county resident or customer other than in the career lab. So is that kind of what you were getting at? I'm trying to understand what that statement means.
Yes. Oh, I was just going to say yes, that's correct, Leslie. So right now, for example, our staff are all kind of dedicated and paid for by the program grants or all of the funding that's associated with our various employment and training programs. So if we were to have a customer or a resident come into the Career Force Center, as an example, and say they really wanted to work with an employment counselor, they needed help kind of sitting down and doing their resume, doing some career search. They were maybe looking into some skills training, all of those things. We would screen them for eligibility for one of our programs. But if they happen to not meet eligibility for one of the programs, we aren't able to assign them to a counselor. We aren't able to spend a significant amount of time with them. If they're in our career lab and which is staffed by Brandon's team, they can certainly consult with a staff person that's out there. We can help them, make their way through an application, do kind of some of that basic support. But in terms of kind of getting that intensive career counseling and those other supports from a career counselor, we don't have the capability of doing that now, just because we don't have a program that is open to folks that don't meet any of those other eligibility requirements.
And this kind of came about through brainstorming. I mean, this bullet is there because, we're trying to brainstorm and what can we do for some of our non-custodial parents in child support to direct them to some skill, applying for own job skills. And it's the bottom line is that employment and training is very structured on what they can pay for and not. So that's kind of, if we had an unlimited pot of money, maybe.
Okay.
If it doesn't meet the federal or state programs, there isn't really anything we're offering, and you guys are seeing that as a crack to try to help some of these folks.
That's correct.
All right.
Can I ask a question specific to that? How many, and I know it's hard, but so even thinking of pre-COVID, how many calls, visits, touches, a month are from people who you can't help because they don't meet those criteria?
I think it's difficult to quantify because we don't necessarily keep a log of the phone calls that come into the Career Lab help desk, which would be our 8310 number. We do get several calls. We talk about them. And we do have visitors that come into the Career Lab that we are able to assist with. But yeah, we do, unfortunately, I don't have a number that I could give you specifically probably, but yeah, we do get a fair amount of calls from somebody who just wants to come in and meet with an employment counselor and just go over some things. We do screen them for eligibility, but and we will work with them as much as we can in our Career Lab. But it's hard to provide those intensive one-on-ones with our support services and things like that. So I don't have I could try to find an estimate maybe and get back to you on that, but I don't think I could find a specific number probably.
And Commissioner, I think another reason why it's hard to quantify that is that we've never done any kind of marketing or push to our general public or residents, other than when we had some CARES funds and we were offering some workshops that we could serve any folks that were kind of affected by COVID and needed some assistance with those workshops. So I think it's one of those, like, we don't know what we don't know. We don't know. We know how many people are in the county that are unemployed. We know just kind of based on our population and our unemployment rate. But we haven't ever been able to kind of do outreach and say, hey, we've got these employment services for you, come on in, because we don't. So we just know that we know how many people are unemployed and know folks could benefit from it and are interested in it just based on the anecdotal data that Brandon just mentioned. But
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Oh, I just said thank you.
Is there anyone in the community? Are there nonprofits, or are there other folks that you can refer people to that you can't serve?
there are not any kind of generalized employment service providers, nonprofit agencies within Scott County currently. I know like Guild Incorporated does employment services for folks that are connected with adult mental health as one example. So there are certainly other organizations that provide employment services, Guild being one example. Although, you know, kind of in other parts of the metro and other counties, there are some nonprofits that have a presence. I'm not aware of any here in Scott County.
Okay, thank you. All right, Leslie, did you have anything else about jobs and training or employment and training before we move on?
You know, I was just curious a little bit about the transportation barriers. You know, we've talked about that over the years, and I was hoping we had better connections and connectivity with Dial Ride and those. Do we still have a big gap there? We've done the evening service, we've done the weekend service. Have we seen any improvements?
I think there's been some, but I think one of the challenges, it kind of goes hand in hand with the fact that there isn't any post-secondary education options currently located in Scott County. I know that's improved with some technology and virtual classes and things like that. But for students, you know, Shakopee, we seem to be hearing less and less of a problem there. But outside of the community, New Prague area, Belle Plaine area, it's very difficult for people there to attend maybe different post-secondary education trainings, to take a bus or whatever it might be to get outside of the county can be somewhat challenging. We continue to hear that.
All right. Mary, would you go to the next slide, please? All right, let's talk a little bit about childcare assistance. And childcare has certainly been in the news quite a lot, and the availability of childcare and the ability to afford childcare and high quality childcare are all really kind of front and center topics right now. Let me just start by asking, is somebody can just kind of walk through what this data means before we ask more questions?
Yeah, I can do that. Different childcare programs out there that our agency manages. One of them is the MFIP-DWP childcare, which is for clients who are participants in either the MFIP or DWP program. We have a transition year childcare program, which are for our folks that have transitioned off of MFIP and DWP. They have a year of transition year childcare that they can get once their MFIP and DWP closes. Could extend it beyond a year depending on the funding that's available. And then this slide shows the number of families on our basic sliding fee childcare wait list, which is our third program. The MFIP and DWP program is a dollar for dollar thing. There's no allocation. It works out to whatever those clients need. It's paid for through the program, where each county receives an annual allocation for the basic sliding fee program. And so we have to monitor that spending very closely. They don't want us to go over, 100% of our allocation, which has happened a couple of times. But so we monitor the spending, and when the spending gets close or the projected percentage for the end of the year is not within the range we need it to be, we will start a waiting list, which means, people who wish to be on child care assistance, if the funding is not available, we put them on a waiting list until funding does become available. So you will see that there's been a wide range of numbers on the waiting list. Right now, we do not have a waiting list. With some of the extra money we got with the COVID relief and those different grants that were out there, we cleared our waiting list January 1st of 2021. So we have had no one on the waiting list since January. If a family calls the agency to inquire about childcare assistance, they're screened, some information is discussed. We provide them with information, and an application is sent out right away to them versus putting them on the list. So it's something that we have to monitor every month based on the spending that we're doing with our allocation.
Okay, so a couple of questions. One is, are all the families who get child care assistance, are they all on another public assistance program? Or if I'm just somebody who doesn't make enough money to afford childcare, can I apply for this, even if I'm not? Okay, so that's
the basic sliding fee is for people who are not on the other programs. They could be on SNAP, but they're not on any of the cash programs.
Okay, thank you.
It's for the public more than the other ones are for the people that are on assistance. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
General child care assistance program for a majority of the people.
Okay, and then is there a plan? Because at one point there were really long waiting lists for child care assistance. Now that we're caught up, is there a plan to stay caught up, or what will it take to stay caught up?
Well, they've been allocating, our allocations are increasing. One thing that that we'll have to start watching, November 1st, the rates that we can pay our providers is increasing. So that will use up our allocation a little bit faster. So we have to, like I said, monitor it monthly because things are changing every month. So November 1st, we could see an increase in expenses due to the provider rates being increased overall. That was a legislative thing that took place.
And I think I would just add, Chris, we're really kind of at the mercy of the annual allocation that we receive. And like Deb shared, she watches it really closely every month. But it's really hard to predict. I mean, we can look at spending patterns and we have a sense for how far along that we are, but it also really is impacted not only by these new provider rates that are coming, by the type of childcare provider, the current complement of folks that are receiving basic sliding fee are using, because the rates also vary based on what the license is or what type of provider it is. It's also going to be different for each family because each family has a different amount of children, and the ages of the children make a difference. So it is really just kind of this whole big mixed bag of factors that go into it.
I kind of would like to add to this is that the people that are on basic sliding fee with Deb's group, they aren't on any other public assistance programs, but they are still required that we get a referral to child support if they go on this program, and they're required to cooperate with us. And that's really important because this child care money is important to them. So we would then look at getting a court order where the non-custodial parent would possibly pay part of the basic support towards childcare, and that helps Deb's pot of money too down the line.
Sure. Thanks, Lisa. We might not have the right folks here to answer this question, but what do we know or think we know about the adequacy of childcare resources in Scott County?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't hear a lot, that they can't find a provider. So I think that the providers out there are adequate right now. I know that there was a lot happening over the last year where people weren't working, so they couldn't take their kids or didn't take their kids to childcare. There was a number of programs and grants that were out there for the providers, that they could stay open to care for the children of essential workers, whether it was in the medical field or other fields. And there was a significant funding that was given to the providers to keep them in business during that tough time. So as people are hopefully going back to work, we could see a change in that respect. But right now, finding a provider has not been an issue. But like Carrie said, there's a significant difference in the amounts charged if you have a licensed in-home provider versus a childcare center. And so that's where it becomes really difficult to monitor and manage the funds, because each family has the choice and they can choose whichever provider they want. If they want a family licensed provider, they can do that. If they want a center, they can, they have the freedom to choose whichever provider they want. And so it's hard to project the spending. And again, why we have to monitor it very closely. The goal is to always get within 90 to 100% of the allocation to spend, within 90 to 100% of the allocation. Closest to 100 absolutely is the best. But if we get in within the 90 to 100%, and we have anything left over, that gets moved into the next year. If you spend less than 90%, you lose what you don't spend. So the goal is always to be between the 90 and 100%. So anything would carry over for the next calendar year.
All right. Mary, I think that we kind of talked through some of the costing on the next page, but would you just flip to that screen before we leave childcare? Is there anything else that anyone on the panel wants to say about the slide?
The comment on the sliding fee, that was another one that was not working well. Does somebody want to talk a little bit about that one as well?
This page 13, is that what you're saying?
No, it's actually page 4 for what's not working and why. We talk about we're the only county that doesn't put any revenue into basic sliding fee childcare. Again, I was just kind of curious about that. It's probably an exacerbating factor.
Yeah, I think we mentioned that because we also had the slide about the waiting list. And so when we do have a wait list, it can be an exacerbating factor when we're working only kind of within our allocation. And as Deb shared, we haven't had a wait list since 2021. So we're really happy about that and hoping that that will be the case going forward for a while at least.
Yeah, we hope so. Our allocation for 2021, our BSF allocation for 2021 is almost $4.2 million. So that's the amount that we're monitoring throughout the year. It is going up to 4.35 million for 2022. So we're hoping that we won't have to set up a wait list again for a while.
Thanks, Deb.
All right, Mary, would you move on to page 14, please? Thank you. Let's talk about the food support programs. Does somebody want to walk through this data slide for us before we do questions?
I can touch base on this one, sure. Under the SNAP program, some families are eligible for what they call expedited SNAP, which means that they will file an application, be interviewed, and if they meet the criteria, their benefits will be issued within 24 hours. So the goal of that is the state has a threshold that they want to see that happen for 55% of the households. There's been some times where we have been under that threshold. So we're working on that. You can see if you look at 2019, we were under the 55%. So in 2019, we had to do a performance improvement plan to increase our amount, and that was put in place. And then you can see in 2020, we moved up to 63.8%. So we were above the threshold and the state. And when we did the performance improvement plan, it was a 2-year plan with the goal of getting above the 55% within a 2-year time frame. And because we got back above it in 2020, the state ended our performance improvement plans. So we are doing much better in this area than we did for a couple of years. So, but this is a tough goal to meet. One of the difficulties is a lot of our applications come through the mail, or they're dropped off and people leave the office, or they're electronically submitted through a state system. And then, so we get the applications, in a timely manner, but we have to try to reach the clients to do the interview. And that can be difficult to get a hold of them in the next, day or so. And so that's where the difficulty comes in meeting this one-day processing, is that our attempts to reach the client are sometimes longer than that time frame.
Okay, and Mary, would you flip to the next slide, please? This is the 30-day, is this correct?
Yes, yep. For all of our cash and SNAP programs, those that aren't under the one-day criteria, we have to do the interviews and process those applications within 30 days, whether that is approval for benefits or denial based on not eligible income-wise or failure to follow through and provide the documents that we need. But all applications need to be acted on within 30 days of the application date. So this is the percentages. And you can see that we've done consistently well in this area. The threshold for this, I believe, is 96% for the state. So that's our goal, is to meet at least that 96%. So you can see where we've been consistently at the state level in this area.
Okay, so do we know anything about people that come onto assistance and then go off? Do they come back on? Like, is there any kind of repeat measure, or what do we know about, or do people come on for a short time and move on and we don't see them again?
There's some of both. Some people came on, for a very short time when their unemployment ended, and they were on until they found a job, and if their job income was sufficient, their SNAP or cash case was closed. Some come on very temporarily when maybe a husband and wife separate and the wife, needs something temporarily while she looks for employment, that type of thing. So I don't remember off the top of my head, Carrie, you might, what it is as far as our percentage based on years. I mean, we don't have very high percentage that reach the 60-month lifetime limit for MFIP. It's a very small percentage.
Yeah, it is a very small percentage. It is only 7%.
Okay. MFIP, but 5-year limit, lifetime limit for families, and like Carrie said, only 7%, reach that. So, and that would be going on and off, for a total of 60 months. So.
Do we have any data, like kind of average length of stay on the program, or something that, because 5 years is a long time, and you have some people, like, do we have any more definition around what people's experiences are in terms of time on the program?
Yeah, Chris, I don't think we have any today. That was a little bit of what we were looking for when we were doing research for this presentation, and DHS has some great MFIP data out there. That was not one that we could find. Some of it, they have a lot of reporting capabilities. Some of it requires special request. That might be a special request one since it's not part of the data sets that are out there, but we could certainly find that.
Okay. And does that have value for your staff? Like, is that a piece of is knowing that have impact on your work?
A lot of the MFIP clients who are on long-term, getting close to or over the 60 months, have a number of other issues, whether it's mental health issues or physical health issues. They're disabled in some way. It's hard to know just how many stay on for those specific reasons, but those would probably be the 7% that Carrie's referring to.
Okay. Can I ask you a couple questions about the navigator role? Jennifer, you did a nice job in your introduction of reminding folks that this is a relatively new position. I think, we want to be helpful to people that need the services. Can you talk about how you help people link up to any of these programs?
Sure. I've been getting referrals from a variety of sources. a lot of it's coming from social workers, or maybe the public's calling. They have an elderly or a disabled child family member, and they just need access to services. They don't know what's out there. So I can be kind of a first point of access to explain the different programs we have available for waivered services, or how elderly people, what the asset and income limits are to get into assisted living and nursing homes, things like that. I'm getting a lot of referrals through social services, where they have clients maybe with mental health issues that are struggling to either get on programs or to stay open on programs. We know they're eligible, but they just can't, keep up with the paperwork or do some of those tough jobs like getting their life insurance verified, that I'm reaching out and helping them. I've been getting referrals from financial workers with, they have clients that have maybe dyslexia or difficulty reading and writing, that they're coming in and meeting with me to help fill out applications. I think a lot of it, I started keeping statistics. I've had since late June, I've had 295 clients I've helped in various ways. And I started keeping track specifically of medical assistance in the month of September, because I think the team decided that was going to be a primary focus. And so for the last couple months, I've noticed a pattern where it's probably 85 to 90% is medical assistance, is where people need the help with getting or staying on the programs.
Thank you. So you have kind of a generalist knowledge of all the programs, that enough to get people referred to the right door.
Right. I mean, the last 8 years I've spent has been working with adult programs, so that is something I'm a little more knowledgeable about. But I've been around. I've been working in human services since 1993, so I do have a lot of knowledge about all the programs that the counties offer. So I'm kind of a good one-stop shop for helping people get connected to other services as well.
All right, thank you. Mary, can you go to the last slide for me? All right, would one of you walk through this? I think one of the things that is important to look at is just where it's a lot of money, right? We're talking about a significant amount of money going into the community. Actually, Mary, if you go back one slide, maybe we could look at that first. And then, there you go. So if somebody could walk through this for us.
Sure, I can do that. So we had a previous measure that looked at food support and all cash programs that were expended into the community. And so for this particular presentation, we took it down to the food support and the family cash benefits. So that would just be pulling out the Minnesota Family Investment Program and the diversionary work program. So this just shows that for each calendar year, the value of the cash assistance and the SNAP benefits that are going out into the community to help support our residents that are eligible for the program and in need. I think that it's probably important to mention here too that the only caveat is that SNAP, this is the entire SNAP complement. We don't have a way within our reporting system to pull out family SNAP versus adults. So this SNAP figure does include everything.
Okay. All right. And so in 2020, over $10 million went back into the community to help support people. Okay.
That's correct.
Now, Mary, can you go to the last slide, please? All right. So can we then talk about where that money comes from and how those programs are supported?
Sure. So what this graph shows, this is kind of a brand new graph that I'm glad that we have, because I think it really kind of illustrates what our budget picture looks like for each calendar year. So this is divided into 3 areas. This is income maintenance, child support, and MPIP DWP. A couple of caveats here. The income maintenance budget is our entire operating income maintenance. We don't have a way of pulling out just the family programs and kind of what expenses are related to those in terms of our overhead and other operating costs. So this is our kind of entire income maintenance budget. Child support is exactly what it is. And then MFIP DWP, for our employment and training unit as a whole, we're kind of divided in terms of in the accounting world into two separate accounting units. We have the employment and training, and that is all of the non-family programs. So that's our dislocated worker, our adult, our youth, and our seniors. And then we have the MFIP and DWP programs, which are our family programs. That's a separate accounting unit. So what you see there is the operating budgets for those specific programs. So this just shows for each year kind of what our revenue was, what our actual expenses were, and then what our actual levy amount was after those were both applied. I think that a couple of other things that are important to mention is that in the child support program, we have a federal reimbursement, a study level of 66% of all of our expenses are reimbursed by federal funds. In income maintenance, we also have a federal reimbursement, and that varies each quarter. It's based on what's called an income maintenance random moments time study. So all of our eligibility workers and childcare workers are part of a big pool of random moments. And every quarter they receive kind of a notice from DHS that says, hey, what are you doing right now? In not those words, but and it asks them to record what program they're working on, what case they're working on. And so what they do is they take a quarterly snapshot and they say, okay, these are all of the programs on average that your staff work on, and we are our revenue comes in those different streams, whether it would be food support, administration of the MFIP program, and administration of the other cash programs. And that generally is anywhere between 50 and 75% based on the program and based on the activity. And then in the MFIP DWP side of things, that is funded through what's called the MFIP or the TANF Consolidated Fund. And for the most part, all of the expenses are completely covered on the employment services side of things by that consolidated grant. And part of the consolidated grant also goes towards, goes into revenue in the income maintenance budget to cover some of the cost of our eligibility determination for those programs.
All right, thanks, Carrie. The last question I was going to ask is just about, I think that that you laid out some strategies in the narrative about protecting the integrity of programs, reducing fraud, those safeguards that that people are, the right people are getting the right money. And I'm just wondering if you could highlight, like, what are your most effective strategies around preventing fraud in these programs? What have you found to be most effective?
Well, I can start, and I think Deb actually also happens to supervise our fraud prevention program, so she can certainly jump in, or anybody else on the line that has any thoughts. I think I would just start by saying, you know, each program comes with its own application and eligibility and verification requirements. And I think that we have a group of eligibility specialists who are detailed, they are diligent, they are, you know, current on policy, and they do their very best to make sure from the very beginning when we receive that application that they have kind of everything in order to determine the most accurate eligibility. And we'll take the time when we don't have what we need to reach out and get that. You know, it's a balancing act with kind of these rigorous timelines and these rigorous performance measures in getting accurate information. And I think that our staff really understand the importance of that accuracy and making sure that the correct level of benefits is always determined and distributed to the families. We have some you know, kind of some just protocols in place that are related to the fraud prevention program that we have within our department that says, you know, if A, B, and C don't quite add up, you know, just as an example, this might be something to consider to pass along to our investigator. There's kind of a variety of different scenarios there. You know, we really encourage staff to kind of do their own due diligence first, make sure that they are kind of looking at the information that's being provided, really making a determination whether this is something that should be passed on or whether we just kind of act based on what we have. So I think given the amount of verification requirements, it's pretty rigid and it's pretty prescribed in terms of how somebody can be eligible and what they have to do to provide it. It's not easy to get on public assistance. I'll just say that. I don't know, Deb or Lisa, or if you guys have anything to add to that.
Yeah, our programs also, our computer programs for the most part interface with each other. And if we in child support get different information than possibly the public assistance, Maxis or childcare, whatever program has, our workers are really good at talking to each other. We have a really open line of communication and they talk to each other all the time. And we might say, hey, we discovered so-and-so is living with so-and-so. What do you know about that? And I think that helps a lot. Wouldn't you agree, Deb?
Yeah, it does. We get a lot of information from the child support officers as far as employment, living arrangements, that type of thing. So we can make the adjustments to the cases at that point. If there's conflicting information between Lisa's group and my group, that may be when a fraud referral would be necessary.
I'm just curious, Jennifer, if there's anything that you'd add from all of your years as an eligibility specialist.
I guess I would say that having well-trained, experienced staff, I've just anecdotally noticed that's where real quality work comes in and noticing those differences. If you're just brand new at this job and you're looking at pay stubs, you don't know what you're looking for, Someone that's been around longer is just going to notice, or when a bank statement comes in, to be knowing to looking at those deposits on there, like, this doesn't match up with what they're telling me at the interview. So I know we have some real quality staff that's been here and some people that have moved on that were really good and really diligent about making fraud referrals and just detail oriented on those sorts of things.
All right, thank you. Leslie, did you have any last comments before we return the floor to the commissioners?
No, I think we should turn it over to the commissioners.
All right, there you have it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, comments or questions from the commissioners?
Sure, Mr. Chair, I'll go. Thank you for the presentation. I think a lot of these things are good reminders. It's good to understand the process and see that. I think, like what you said, it is hard to get on public assistance, and we're not spending a ton of levy dollars on this type of public assistance. Good for us to all remember and think about. I guess I'm wondering a little bit, and it may be too early to comment, but especially with the diversionary work program and even the MFib work requirements, now that many of those regulations are off and we're into 2021, are we seeing that that's going back to normal? I guess pre-COVID, as far as the percentage of folks getting off of MFib in that amount of time and participating in those activities, and especially the diversionary work program too. Are we a good sense in where that's going, or are there some other barriers in place?
Thanks, Commissioner. I think, oh, sorry, Deb, were you going to jump in?
Go ahead, you're fine.
Okay, I was just going to say that I don't think we know yet. The diversionary work program just started up again September 1st, and that is also the date when the majority of the waivers kind of lifted and we went back to regular programming, for lack of a better word. So I think that it will probably be a good number of months before we really have a sense of where things land. But what would you say, Deb, or Brandon too?
Yeah, I was going to say basically the same thing. They did end, DWP did come back September 1st, and the waivers allowing us to work with, Brandon's team work with, and for us to put sanctions on those that aren't complying, all started, but everybody started free and clear. So everybody started in compliance again September 1st. It did not matter what they had done previously. They were all starting in a good spot and needed to just move forward. So the earliest that we can start putting sanctions back on is going to be November 1st. And that would be on some of the cases where Brandon's team contacted them and they've just not followed through on anything since the contact in September. So the first sanctions are going back on place November 1st.
I'm assuming that the current environment, obviously there's tons of jobs available. I feel like employers have only gotten more flexible. That should help that process. I understand there's always folks, whether it's a mental health issue or caring for an elderly person or a disabled person in their home. But I'm hoping, I'm hopeful that you're going to have some more flexibility for employers and helping these folks find something.
Yeah, we sure hope so too.
Other questions? I think that we really answered them throughout. So thank you. Good presentation.
I just had a question. I don't know if it's really relevant to your presentation, but yeah, I don't know how long ago this was, but in the Metro, there was a big story about fraud in related to daycares and the amount of dependents being counted that would be going to daycare. And it sounded like families were trading kids or loaning kids for a daycare count, and there was massive fraud. Are you aware of that story? And how
yes,
that
I am. We had a couple providers that we did appeals on and disqualified.
Okay.
Years ago.
So how would you prevent something like that?
It's difficult. That one those fraud cases have moved up to the OIG office more so than the county level at this point. So any referrals that we get in, we check on them locally, but we also check with OIG, Office of Inspector General, to see if they are working on a case. And then we're really careful not to interfere with their investigation. So it's a combination of county and state working on those investigations right now. The state took over a lot more of it back in the time when it was, in the news and everything was going on at that point. So OIG is very much in charge of those investigations right now.
All right, thank you. Other questions or comments? Hearing none, thank you so much for your presentation. A lot of material to digest and understand, but thank you. We appreciate your great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great day now.
Thank you.
Let's see, I gotta check my scorecard, find out where we are. We shuffled things around so much. We're on to 8.1. Adopt resolution number 2021-201, award the sale of taxable general obligation capital improvement refunding bonds, series 2021A, in the original aggregate principal amount of $10,080,000, fixing their form and specification, directing their execution and delivery, providing for their payment, providing for the escrowing and investment of the proceeds thereof, and providing for the redemption of bonds refunded thereby. Kind of a wordy sentence there. Go ahead, take it away.
Good morning, Commissioners. That's me. Sorry, everybody. Morning, Commissioners. Yes, we did have our bond sale yesterday. I just want to do a couple of reminders. So this is a funding. So our call date for these bonds actually is until 2024. And the reason we're doing it so early is anticipation of interest rates going up and not getting much savings going forward. I'm going to turn it over to Paul Steinman here with Baker Tilly in a moment to talk through the details of that sale. When we talked about this originally, we did expect about $100,000, $112,000 in savings from 2024 through 2027. And then additional, or about $10,000 in savings through 2028 through 2034. That did come down a little bit as interest rates have started to creep up. But we did have a good sale overall. And with that, Paul, are you on?
I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Lenz. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. I'll present the bid tabulation that we took yesterday at noon in our offices for bids on your $10,080,000 of bonds. You had 9 bidders with an interest rate proposed from 1.44% all the way up to 1.61%. But Morgan Stanley and Company provided the lowest true interest cost bid of 1.44%. And that resulted in total interest cost savings net of all costs of issuance of about $460,000 for this refunding. So a very positive result. And then just lastly, I'll add that Standard & Poor's did affirm the county's AAA bond rating as part of this process. So congratulations on that as well. And I'm happy to take questions.
You know, just a question on bond rating and stuff. Standard & Poor's, I mean, do they all, I noticed, does Moody rate harder than Standard & Poor's, and what are the difference between the different rating agencies?
Well, Mr. Chair, there really are three, actually 4 rating agencies. In the most simplest sense, they rate generally the same. Although when you auger down into it, there are differences in the rating agencies and how they rate their credits. But generally, they're all supposed to be rating everybody generally in the same way. So you have an S&P, AAA. Some entities have gone to Moody's or Fitch or been with those agencies for forever, so they've remained. But really, in the end, they're for AAA entities, there is very little differentiation between the rating agencies. More so when you get to the A rating category, there would be some more noticeable differences between the agencies.
Thank you. Okay, other comments or questions? Go ahead.
Commissioner, this is Danny. Just a couple of other notes on the ratings. We've heard historically that, particularly from Moody's, that the size of our organization and county, as well as the state's kind of para obligations, always weighed on our ratings in there, which is 2 things we don't have any control over, which is why we've kind of gone in the direction of Standard & Poor's, which doesn't quite harm us as much in the ratings for things that we cannot control. Another thing I forgot to mention, we did provide an updated resolution as well as the title for the action request. And I would just note that the aggregate principal amount is for $10,015,000. I believe it was $10,080,000 that was read out. So just to clarify that.
Yep, that's correct. Thank you.
And Danny, on the rating, they had said everything was safe to improve and to beware of.
Yeah, so the rating was actually very good in the comments they said there was actually no negative comments from the rating panel for Scott County, and everything was either going up or stable, and then stable was those items that were already as rated as highly as they do. The one thing they noted, and not specifically to Scott County, but to all governmental entities, was to beware of fiscal cliffs with the ARPA funds. That's something they're watching for as we utilize ARPA funds, to not build in any fiscal cliffs when those funds are no longer usable. Just a piece of advice and something that Leslie and I have been talking about, and the board has been directing us on since we've started discussing these things.
Mr. Chair, Danny, do they worry any about, because all those funds have some sort of criteria that someday they could come back and some places would be like, you couldn't use it on this, you need to pay us back for that. Is that a concern or not?
That was not a specific item they referenced in that, but I'm guessing that as they're looking at those, they're evaluating fund balance health, which they noted for us was strong, and those sorts of things to be able to handle those sorts of changes. The other way, and hopefully with the ongoing reporting for the ARPA funds, at least for us, we could have any of those things that might raise a red flag noticed earlier, and a chance to repurpose those funds at a later time.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, are you looking for a motion to approve this?
Yes.
I would make that motion to adopt resolution number 201.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second it and say, nice job.
Yeah. Yeah, we always like to save a big chunk of money like that. That's a very good situation. So we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Tracy, would you take the roll?
Commissioner Weckman Brecky,
Aye.
Commissioner
Aye.
Wolf, Commissioner Beard,
Aye.
Beard,
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank
All right.
you.
We're on to item 9.1, which is to conduct a public hearing at 9:30 a.m. to receive comment on the adoption of amendments to Scott County Ordinance number 17 and adopt resolution 2021-200, adopting revised Scott County Ordinance number 17, retail tobacco sales.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we're here today. Obviously, this is a follow-up for the retail. This was supposed to be for the public hearing. That notice was published. I'm not seeing anyone in the room today for that public hearing. I believe the hall was checked as well. I think we did get one letter that was sent out to the commissioners within the last couple days. Someone that was requesting that we not raise the age to 21. I will just for the board's information clarify that that is a federal regulation. We don't have the power to be more lenient in that respect. Other than that, the county staff did go back with regards to some questions or comments that were received previously. We've submitted what we believe is the appropriate updates considering those comments. And if there are any questions, I can certainly answer that. But the action today would be to approve the amended revised ordinance.
Now, just as a technical item here, do we, even though we don't see anybody, do we need to technically open and close the public hearing?
Yes.
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 Okay, we'll take a motion to open the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman. All
Second.
right. Motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Tracy, would you take the roll?
Commissioner Weckman Brecky,
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf,
Aye.
Commissioner Beard,
Aye.
Commissioner Beard, Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye. Motion carries. The public hearing is open. Is there anyone wishing to speak during the public hearing? Okay, we'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Tracy, would you take the roll?
Commissioner Weckman Brecky,
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf,
Aye.
Commissioner Beard,
Aye.
Commissioner Beard, Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye. Public hearing is now closed, and now we're looking for an adoption of the resolution. Do we have a motion?
I'll move it.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Mr. Chairman, question for, was that Jeannie that was making the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jeannie, I heard some of your comments there when we first we first moved to this agenda item. But did I hear you say that basically you made the temperate changes and comments that we referred to at the last time this came up here a couple of weeks ago, like the golf course cigars and a couple things like that?
Chair, Commissioner, yes, that's correct. There were
Okay.
some concerns with regards to flavored cigars. I don't think that that was an actual issue when we reviewed. There was, however, some question, and based on prior direction, that we had limited single cigar sales. So that was modified and taken out for the board's direction on that particular issue.
Okay. Okay, good. Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. That's it.
Okay, any more questions or comments? Tracy, would take the roll.
Commissioner Weckman Brecky,
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf,
Aye.
Commissioner Beard,
Aye.
Commissioner Beard,
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye. A motion is adopted. We're on to committee reports and commissioner updates. If we could start with Commissioner Brecky.
Mr. Chair, our last meeting was October 5th. We have a workshop after that board meeting. Later that day, I had together a weekend steering committee meeting, And then that evening, I attended both Blakely Township and Belle Plaine Township monthly township meetings. Both of those meetings, we talked a bit about the proposed change to our ordinances about motocross tracks. Also talked a little bit just about how things are going as far as process with our planning, zoning, and permit department. So those I don't even want to say concerns. Those conversations were relayed to staff, and they're following up with those two townships to make sure we're all on the same page. On October 6th, I had my IDI review meeting with Stacy Wells. She's just does a great job facilitating discussion. Had a nice meeting with her. That evening on October 6th, had a ditch meeting open house in Belle Plaine where Cindy and staff and our attorney on ditch law facilitated discussion, and had a handful of landowners there who had good questions about the reallocation of benefits and all the things we're talking about in our ditch board world. On October 7th, we had Justice Steering Committee meeting. Really the bulk of that meeting was taken up by just talking about the backlogs in our court system, how all of us from community corrections to court administration to the judges to our sheriff's department are trying to remove any barriers to really help clear up so much of that past backlog that happened because of COVID, but also stay current on right now's caseload. Really big lifts for everybody, and I think everybody's working hard to figure out how to do it, but we still are quite a bit behind, and there's a lot of pressure on all of those systems. Later that day, I had a meeting with Chris Harder and our two newer outreach specialists, Mark and Marlene, just getting to know them a bit and talking through issues. It was a nice meeting and good to meet them in person. That evening on October 7th, attended Helena Township meeting, Sand Creek Township meeting, and Louisville Township meeting. Again, some talk about the proposed changes to the motocross ordinance. Louisville Township, really the discussion was around the Renaissance traffic management and some of the terrible congestion they saw the last 2 weeks of the festival this year, and the feedback they're getting from some businesses, including Seaver's Corn Maze, just about how that really impacted things for everybody. October 8th, attended the scale meeting. October 11th, participated in the Scott County Soil and Water Conservation District water tour. We went to New Prague municipal water treatment plant. We also went to some DNR monitoring wells, and then ended up at Ridges where we had presentation on different water quality. It was all about water this year, so it was a good tour. October 12th, had a meeting with the MELSA executive director on personnel matters. Later that day, attended my first CAP board meeting. As you recall, Commissioner Beard termed out on his good service there, and I've taken his place. Just a little bit of dates on the CAP move. On November 2nd, the food shelf will be moving to the new facility at the Old Corn Growers Building. On November 12th, administration will be moving. And then on November 15th, the thrift store will be moving. And the thrift store, of course, is going to the old Pier 1 Imports space in Southbridge. So that should be a great space for them, really allow them to do a bigger business, but it also requires some more support because there's more expenses there. October 13th, had the Scott County Historical Society board meeting. The 14th was the Fish monthly meeting. The topic and presentation was CAP and all the CAP services. Thought that was a really good presentation to remember the different programs with CAP through the 3 counties and make sure we connect where appropriate. And then finally, last Friday on October 15th, attended the AMC District 10 fall, I think, fall board meeting, and voted on the priorities, the policy priorities from our district. Talked a bit about housing. It was a hybrid meeting. I was there in person, but really good turnout virtually also. And then, of course, I got my first grandbaby this weekend on Sunday, October 17th. Cora Elaine was born. She's doing well. She came home from the hospital last night. So had to add that.
Pretty good.
Well, congratulations. Commissioner Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the 5th, Newmarket Township met, pretty quiet there. On the 7th, On to Santee Township, for no other reason, I guess, but just to see what's going on. And also, they were talking about the new noise ordinance with motorcycles and motocross, and a lot of, I don't know, was a half dozen people talked about that. And you know, most of them, I think, don't want any changes to that ordinance. So then the scale meeting on the 8th, the soil and water tour, I was at one of the stops on the 11th, because I had planning and zoning that evening, and that went pretty late. Most of the 4 or 5 of the items at Fieldstone were on that agenda, and so that yeah, went late into the evening and all passed. On the 13th, the MESB, and then also that afternoon, Credit River, met with the chair, the mayor of that board, and our administrator, Leslie Vermillion. Talked about a couple of things coming up in that area. 27 is, if you drive down that road, I don't know if many here have driven down there, but it has changed and is changing substantially. So, you know, there's wiped out a bunch of trees, cleared some right-of-ways. They're going to put some frontage roads and close off some roads here next year, but they're getting ready for that. And it will be very nice. A lot of the trees they cut out over by the Cleary Lake, many trees will be replaced there. So you don't have to call me nasty for the trees there anymore. Just saying. So, and then that night, Cedar Lake Sewer met, and things are doing okay there. We had a couple problems with some blockages that we're going to get fixed up there, and we had to move a line. On the 14th, I-35 met. We were actually going to have a little opening yesterday of the Lake Street Bridge, and that got postponed. And the MESB Finance met on that on the 14th on the morning. Elko New Market that evening. Spring Lake Township met that evening also. Kind of a bigger, a couple little permits there in Spring Lake, but 282 is open. So you can drive from Jordan to Prior Lake on 282, and beautiful, nice road, all open now. So everybody's happy there. On the 15th, the Workforce Investment Board, I filled in for Barb, who was at AMC. They talked about electric cars and and their influence and how they're coming on. The problem is charging stations. Another problem is that electricity. If we're getting rid of gas or combustible, then how do you fill that in, and how fast does it take to charge those cars? And even at this point, on some of the biggest days of electric consumption, 1 or 2% of our electricity is made by solar or wind. And so, it's tough to get rid of some of the older types of power producers, which is coal, gas, nuclear, whatever. So then last night, Prior Lake had on the 18th, they talked about affordable housing. And then Credit River had a meeting, and that was a short meeting, well attended. And then this morning we just had a little tour of the facility here. So anyhow, that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Beard.
Good morning. Before I get started, I have a question for Commissioner Wolf on his report. That transit station at Lake Street and 35W, Tom, any indication on how in the world somebody managed to hit that and kill themselves?
I don't know. This was not it was actually supposed to be yesterday, the 18th, but I don't know what happened there. I was shocked by that. So
yeah. Okay, thank you. On the 5th, after the last board meeting, we had a kind of a closed session with senior leadership for the discussion on race relationships and equity and things at the county. And on the 7th, Transportation Committee meeting was held virtually. Got quite an update on things that are going on and where the funding is for the projects that are moving along now. On the 8th, I attended the AMC, that's the statewide board of directors meeting that morning. And that afternoon, I'm still on the advisory board for the TPEC process at the Humphrey School. I've been on that now for about 12 or 13 years, and it's just good to be there and connect with transportation academics and influencers from across the state. It was interesting to have the discussion because it was all about transit and whether or not the traffic patterns were going to reemerge as they have been in the past to the downtown, St. Paul, Minneapolis in particular. We spent about 2 hours listening to some pretty smart people debate the investments that we've been making in min-pass lanes and in train tracks and light rail in particular, and how things are changing in the economy and in people's attitudes. It was pretty impressive to listen to that discussion and think, well, out here where we live, people still get in their cars and pickup trucks and move themselves around. So we're still pretty much in the way things have been. But boy, in the core cities, there's some real debate going on about how things are changing. On the 12th, I actually came out of my house and actually met Administrator Leslie Vermillion for breakfast over at Ruby's. Excuse me. Leslie, I think you'll agree I was good for about an hour and a half there, then started to fade out on you. So I had to go home and re-energize my batteries, but it was good to get out of the house and come out with real people and hang out with everyone again. Mr. Chairman, that's my report.
Thank you. Commissioner Beer.
Thank you very much. On the 5th, the workshop, as was mentioned. On the 8th, the scale to be continued. That was session 1. I can't wait for session number 2. And it was super enlightening and very informative, but also I would say, let me think about this for a second. Nope, I don't have to think about it for a second. The most important part of that scale meeting is I announced my grandson was born while I was there. Not at the meeting though, not at the meeting, but while I was at the meeting. So we've got some grandson, granddaughter, the whole kit and caboodle. So it's not, I don't have one, but down the end of the table. So it was a good week, good month, good month for reports. 14th, also mentioned the fish. That was a very, I learned a lot with the CAP agency, just kind of having a redo. Didn't realize that was part of a 100-year organization nationwide. That was news to me that day. So learned something new every day. So I checked that off the box. The 18th, Prior Lake City, I went to the workshop. They did talk about, they had the blueprint for housing presentation. I think were they the last one or the last one that's actually going to get the presentation? That is a scale movement. Am I right? I'm looking down at Leslie versus the Scott County housing blueprint.
No, it's the scale housing blueprint. It came out of Live, Learn, Earn, and it's supposed to give some high level strategy and bring the issues of housing to the discussion with the electeds and the communities.
Right. It's always presented as a Scott County, like somehow it's a scale. We need to make that, it's a scale thing. And there were some good questions asked about the numbers and is the math tying out and this and that, which is, it's good to have a discussion. It's always good to have a discussion. So they had theirs last night. They also talked about what are they going to do with their ARPA money, and I made sure they knew that we could take it if they didn't have a use for it. But you know what? They had a use for it. So, and then of course this morning was the tour. With that, that concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. My report is a little light. I 2 weeks ago I broke my leg, and so I've been hobbled and in pain, and I'm now to the point where I can with the crutch and the walking boot make some meetings that I would have missed. I just have to figure out how to get there. But so on the 5th, I had the workshop for IDI. The 7th, the monthly meeting with Leslie Vermillion. Later that same day, the Transportation Committee. 2 big topic items there were the transportation sales tax, which we'll be talking about today in a workshop. And then also we had a letter that we've sent to Mayor Hovland, the chair of the TAB, on funding issues and priority issues. And if you haven't seen the letter, had to get rushed off to the TAB, but I would ask Tracy to send you a copy of that letter. It has to do with things like, or she seemed to be taking dollars away from roadways and spending it on trails and ped stuff, and make the point that every road project that we do has trails associated with it, pedestrian elements to it, and also dynamics like it's very hard for suburban areas, outlying suburban areas to compete with Minneapolis and St. Paul for funding of projects, and we need funding of projects to provide the housing that the region is going to need in the future. Those are the kinds of high level things that are in that letter, but I encourage you to look at it. On the 8th, we had part 1 of the marijuana conversation, and then we'll have part 2 in December. I'm kind of interested to hear, I think we're going to try and get some people from like Colorado Springs and tell us what their experience has been on the law itself, and then the aftermath of the law being adopted. I think that'll be very interesting. All the presentations, I think that day will be interesting. It's going to be a nuts and bolts. How does legalization affect things like taxation or law enforcement or etc. Okay, on the 14th, we had our 169 Corridor Coalition annual meeting. We gave catalyst of the coalition awards to Representative Albright, Senator Pratt, and Representative Craig for the work they have done on behalf of the Corridor Coalition. We elected chair and vice chair and other positions. Burkhart will continue to be the chair, with Matt Lehman being the vice chair. And Commissioner Beard and I have a position there on the executive committee as well. On the 18th, the Scale Service Delivery Committee, one of the big items of conversation was dispatch for fire. And it came out that if you had one position over a 24/7 kind of period, it's quite an expensive endeavor. I think the number $500,000 got mentioned as the cost potentially of that. And question is, who's going to pay for that? Was kind of lately discussed and sort of went around the edges of that. One administrator, I think, was suggesting, well, it's a countywide service. I think he was sort of pushing well, county ought to pay for it. But then I would, if I was getting into debate, I would remind him there are numerous countywide services that cities benefit from and participate in the cost of already. I mean, there's a numerous list of that kind of thing. So, but I think there's going to be debate on that and who's going to pay for it. And I think our direction is that really we ought to have wide participation of the benefiting parties to help pay for that if we're going to have fire dispatch. That's into my report. We're on to county administrator update.
Chairman, yeah, just a couple things here. Wanted to update you real quick on the opioid settlement. It came up at AMC on Friday. They have reached an agreement. Our Attorney General has signed on to the settlement that is nationwide. It's an 18-year settlement payout process. One of the issues with it is that we don't have a settlement plan right now. So AMC is actually asking the county, I believe the League of Cities, the cities to hold off on the adoption of it to probably sometimes toward mid-end of December. So how our board meetings play into this could be potentially an issue we're gonna have to monitor. And the reason they're doing that is because right now, 15% of it would go to the state, 15% to the county or local governments, and then 70% would default to this abatement fund, of which nobody even knows what that is, really can define it. And so right now, AMC has appointed 4 county attorneys and a couple of the commissioners and leadership to meet with the Attorney General's office, who does get the final say in the settlement plan. Go to the legislature or the governor. This is the Attorney General's decision. But he seems very open to evaluating this, is the word, because in some of the states that have already settled, 70% has gone to the local governments. Because they deal with the addiction, they deal with the mental health, their police are out on the streets with prevention programs with youth and things like that. So there's more to come, but Ron is aware. He's got the paperwork. He has reached out to the state Attorney General's office as well. So we'll keep you up to speed on that. And we're not targeting huge sums of money. The total settlement, I think, is like 300 million for the state if everybody kind of signs on. If we don't sign on, the amount of funds becomes smaller. And so that's one of the points, to bring more money to the state to help with the prevention. They really would like to bring more funds in as part of that settlement. So there'll be more to come on that. Let's see here. Our next meeting is October 26th, and that is a work session here or hybrid, depending how you folks want to come in. We're going to talk a little bit about the budget. We have some of that preliminary information that Commissioner Ulrich just was talking about with dispatch, the attorney's agreement to fund their local joint board there versus the county picking that up and how that's coming into play. So there will be some information on that, as well as a real high level ARPA, right? You gave us some high level things, housing, literacy, some mental health. Is there a way to bring parks and libraries in? We do have an update on revenue recapture, which is a good thing. It gives you more flexibility going into that meeting with some projections for next year. So that meeting will kind of focus on that. And then, of course, we have the transportation sales tax discussion coming up, and I'm hoping it's more like 20 minutes than 60 minutes, but we've done a lot to try to focus it, get it focused on a few projects that we can move ahead instead of long, lengthy things where we have to debate with folks. So Lisa has a good presentation on that. You'll give us some direction on the time period and the projects you want to support, so we can bring those back to scale and then get resolutions from each one of the communities. So yeah, that's coming up next. And that is the end, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you for that. We're on to our recess for attorney-client meeting.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we don't need to meet today.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Seeing none or hearing none, we'll ask Tracy to take the roll.
Commissioner Weckerly.
Aye.
Commissioner Wolf.
Aye.
Commissioner Beard.
Aye.
Commissioner Beer.
Aye.
Commissioner Ulrich.
Aye. Motion carries. We're adjourned, and we're going to go in.